All right, everybody good? Well, kia ora, everybody. Day by day in this election campaign, I think the choices facing New Zealanders become clearer. Today, my goal here has been to set out what a positive future in terms of the relationship between Māori and non-Māori in New Zealand can look like. I believe that we all have a stake in this. I believe that ongoing work to strengthen the relationship between Māori and non-Māori will benefit all New Zealanders. I believe we've made a lot of progress, and now is not the time to turn back. New Zealanders have a clear choice. We can continue to move forward, we can continue to address the historic discrimination against Māori and the disparities that has created, or we can turn back. I think we have to keep moving forward as a country, and I do believe that's a clear question that New Zealanders will be asking themselves as they head into the polls. Here today, we've seen examples of what the partnership approach looks like. We saw those cadets who potentially, on one side, could be locked up. On the other side, we've got other choices, which is about giving them a better future, one that involves them being our future chefs, our future accountants. They have a much, much brighter future when we're working together. There were other examples that we saw today of the progress that we're making through a partnership approach. I want to keep that momentum going.
One of those examples was the two gentlemen that came and talked to you about the Jobs for Nature program. Yep. At the moment, it's funded by the COVID contingency fund, and that runs out in 2024. Are you going to extend that funding?
I think the Jobs for Nature, look, I'm not making a specific announcement on that today, but I think the Jobs for Nature fund is a template for the type of work that we can do using the Climate Emergency Response Fund to make sure that we are using the proceeds from the emissions trading scheme to do things that are good for the environment, that reduce our emissions, that create jobs, and that leave all of New Zealand better off.
If you say it's such a successful scheme and you're looking to emulate it, why not just copy it and extend it?
Well, what I just said was I'm not making an announcement on that today.
So there is something coming. You are thinking about extending it.
I'm not making an announcement on that today. I don't know how much clearer I could be about that. Katie. I was scheduled to be here, so this was pre-planned.
Rob Valentine, the New Zealand First candidate who you quoted in your speech, he's doubled down on his comments today, saying, well, they weren't targeted at mainstream Māori, but the disingenuous, elitist Māori. What do you say to that? I
think that's a question for Christopher Luxon. It's about time he showed some leadership and ruled out working with New Zealand First.
Have you budgeted for all of the commitments of varying degrees that were made last night? You know, bowel cancer screening, nurses, all of that sort of thing. Have they been factored in?
Where there were some commitments we made, like, for example, looking at extra leave for women, I was clear that we haven't budgeted those in, but we've agreed to look at those ideas. In terms of bowel cancer screening, you'll see in our fiscal plan yesterday, we've set aside $14 billion for health over the next, I think it's 4 years, over the forecast period, and that will give us opportunities to expand existing services like bowel screening.
What about I know you talked about money already going in for nurses' pay, but do the commitments take it further than what you said last night? Does that take it further than the existing funding?
As I've said, the $14 billion that we have set aside in the budget ensures that the health system can maintain what it's doing now, and there will be opportunity to expand services within that as well.
The bowel cancer screening age at the moment is 60. What age, just to clarify, what age?
So, to be clear, I'm not putting a specific age or timetable on that at the moment, because we'll have to work through what that would cost. We'd also have to work through the practical ability to deliver those things. But I've absolutely committed to lowering the age, and that's what we will do.
Okay, so last night you kind of agreed to lower it to 50 and then also make it 45 as well for those who are at risk, or those who are...
Yeah, but I'm not... Look, we want to progressively continue to lower the age. I'm not putting a particular timetable on that yet until I've worked out exactly how much that's going to cost and how feasible, what the timetable is that we could feasibly do that in.
And are you going to fund the drugs? Because at the moment Pharmac doesn't fund any bowel cancer immunotherapy drugs.
Well, that is Pharmac's decision, but actually, as you would have seen from the commentary of some of the experts, actually earlier screening will mean fewer people needing the drugs in the first place because they can be treated for the condition before it gets to that point.
What if they have the condition though? What if the screening finds out they've got bowel cancer, there's no drugs, they've got to go and get a mortgage?
Drugs are only one of the options. So they don't. If the early screening identifies it, that doesn't necessarily mean they need to go on to those drugs. There are other options. There are other ways that they can be treated. You best to speak to the experts about that, who would talk you through that. But in terms of which drugs get funded, I've been really clear. I'm not going to, as a politician, pick and choose which drugs get funded or not. The pharmaceutical industry would love that. They would spend millions of dollars lobbying politicians like they do in other countries in order to get their drug funded. I don't think that's a way of determining which drugs New Zealanders should and shouldn't have access to.
You said last night that takes your funding commitments beyond what was in your fiscal plan?
There are some where we'll have to work through what that means, such as the one that I've just mentioned. We've set aside extra funding for health because we know there's more pressure. But in something like screening for bowel cancer, for example, there are both ups and downs to that. Yes, it costs a bit more, but it also will save more money as well because you'll end up with fewer people needing more advanced care. And so we have allowed a significant window of funding to allow us to make those kind of prioritisation decisions.
And early voting starts on Monday. What is your message to people? Are you encouraging people to get out and cast their vote? Do you think that they should maybe wait a while and 2 weeks to run in a campaign? What's your message there?
Look, if people have really made up their mind, of course they should vote. But if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not quite sure yet, I've still got some nagging doubts in my mind, then do wait because there's still another 2 weeks of campaigning to go.
There are predictions that early voting is going to be potentially even larger than previous elections. What impact does that have on your campaign and I suppose the window for getting your message out?
I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that analysis, actually. Last election was a bit of an aberration. There were reasons why people were going out to vote early because they were worried that something might happen and they might not be able to vote at all. And this election will be a little bit different to that one. I do think there's a lot of undecided voters out there still.
Just in terms...
Are you going to early vote?
I haven't quite decided yet.
Just in terms...
I haven't even figured out where I'm going to vote yet. So I'll do it at home, but I'm not actually at home very much. So we'll have to figure out where that's going to fit in.
Just back on some of the things you touched on today, are you saying that National and ACT New Zealand Best are deliberately trying to create divisions in society?
As I've said, using phrases like one system for all, when it's clear that one system has actively discriminated against a group of people, isn't a vision for the future that I'm going to subscribe to. I think we do have to acknowledge that our system's been discriminatory in the past, that we're doing something about that, and that that's a positive thing for all New Zealanders.
And your speech was...
Wellington today,
Yeah.
for instance, right, there's still clearly some quite big divisions. What are you going to do if you are re-elected to actually try and heal some of that?
Look, it's a small group of people. It's, relative to the overall New Zealand population, it's a small group of people. And one of the number one issue that was behind the protest last time they were at Parliament was the mandates. Every single one of those has been removed.
You're accusing like some of race baiting, essentially, right?
Well, I'm certainly accusing the collective National ACT New Zealand First potential coalition of doing that.
So
Of race baiting?
So
Yes.
some race baiting?
Well, he's certainly not calling it out.
Is it racist? Is it racist to do so?
Well, New Zealand First, for example, those statements that I've just read are overt racism.
Yes, but Mr. Luxon, you said he's used one system for all, and the system does not work for all. Is it racist?
It's certainly consistent with dog whistle racism that we've seen in New Zealand campaigns previously.
In your speech...
Is that a sign that is actually how people in New Zealand feel, though, that people agree with that?
I certainly hope not.
In your speech, you spent a lot of time looking back in terms of Māori Crown relations, but there wasn't a lot of looking forward in terms of what the Labour Party, if re-elected, will be doing. And we haven't had, to my understanding, any sort of Māori-specific policy from the Labour Party. So is something coming?
It was actually one of the first things that we launched was our Māori manifesto for this coming election, and it is very much about continuing the things that we're doing at the moment. Mm-hmm. The Māori Health Authority, Te Aka Whaiora, has only just been established. It's getting up and running. That's going to be transformational in terms of the healthcare that we can deliver for Māori and the health outcomes that we can deliver for Māori. But we have to see that through, and the other side have said that they will take it away. So our ongoing commitment to that is a point of differentiation in this election. And I could name many others where housing is another good example, where we're making so much progress. In education, the work that we have been doing around giving Māori more self-determination around their educational outcomes, these things don't happen by accident. We've been driving those forward and we want to keep doing that.
And just in terms of your campaign so far, as I understand it, there was an incident with the Taxpayers Union at your event yesterday. Can you walk us through what happened? Did they try and get in somehow? I'm
not entirely sure what happened there. I understand that they were trying to pass themselves off as members of the media in order to get into our fiscal plan launch, but I don't know all of the details.
Is that acceptable for people to be passing themselves off as the fourth estate?
I found the fact that they followed me to the next event that I was doing in the car behind mine a bit more creepy.
On some other issues, what impact do you think tax cuts will have on the way people vote, and what's your voters or attempted by them?
I think New Zealanders aren't looking at one single issue in this campaign. I think they are thinking about the future of the country. I think the majority of New Zealanders now can see that National's numbers don't add up, and that actually to pay for their promises, they're going to have to cut deeply into the things that New Zealanders care about.
But at what point do you start offering tax relief? I mean, you have acknowledged that tax income thresholds, for example, aren't fit for purpose anymore with wage growth. I mean, what are you saying to people in terms of relief that they could be offered through the tax system? I mean, your own people have said it's unfair, for example.
I've already said many, many times, actually from the beginning of the year, that in time we will look at tax thresholds when the country's in a position to be able to afford that. But doing it right now would mean very significant cuts to jobs, to the public services that New Zealanders rely on, like health and education, and would mean that all of the other things that we're talking about in this campaign, bearing in mind all of the things that we were talking about last night and all of the extra things we were asked to commit to, none of them would be possible if we start cutting government spending.
Given the state of the books, I mean, is that going to be possible within a first term? Is that something you would actively look at, or is it more like we recognise it's a problem, but we're not really going to do anything about it?
I'm certainly not making a commitment to that in the next term, but what I'm saying is at a point when we're in a position to do that, I'm certainly open to the idea of threshold adjustments.
If it's not going to be in the next 3 years, then what's the point of acknowledging?
No, I think what is meaningful is being upfront with New Zealanders about what we are going to spend taxpayer money on. We have done that. Yesterday we set out a very comprehensive plan that itemises every one of the promises that we've made, how we're going to pay for them, how much they're going to cost. The National Party still have not done that.
But you're acknowledging that the tax system isn't necessarily fair or fit for purpose, but it's too hard?
I acknowledge we've made significant changes, and many of those changes are things the National Party want to dial back on. For example, the extension of the Bright Line test means that people who are speculating in housing and forcing first-time buyers out of the market are actually paying tax on that now. The National Party want to dial that back.
I mean, income tax, that's something that affects the vast majority of the population. As I said, your party and your own ministers have said it's not a fair system.
At the moment, if we were to adjust tax thresholds, the benefit that households get from that is very small, but the price that they pay for that would be greater, because to do that we would need to cut into the public services that they rely on, and they would end up paying more. So taking, for example, the household on the median wage with 2 children, one of whom's in early childhood education and will get the benefit of the 2-year-old subsidy from next year, that household, with the cumulative effect of the policies that we've announced, whether it's GST off fruit and vegetables, whether it's the free public transport we're doing now, whether it's the prescriptions, extending working for families, discounted early childhood education, they'd be about $371 a fortnight better off under Labour. National's promising them $250. I think New Zealanders actually know that National's plan, when they weigh up what's on offer, will leave a lot of New Zealanders worse off.
Is it taking GST fully off food at all? Te Pāti Māori are proposing that.
We're just not in a position to afford that at the moment. It has a huge price tag with it, and we're just not in a position to be able to do that.
Just on Northland, while you're here, how worried are you about keeping this seat, Jane? Do you think you're going to be able to keep hold of it?
Well, we all know that I won by the smallest majority in the country with just 163 votes. But as I have in the 5 campaigns that I've run in Northland, I'm going hard. I'm making sure that the issues are being discussed, that everybody is making a commitment to the ongoing investment that's needed in Northland, which we're going to see this afternoon. I'm not accepting poll results that I've seen, and I'm out there campaigning right up until October the 14th, including new enrolments, which we just got today.
What are the issues? Has Labour done enough to try and keep the seat? Northland has always felt neglected. Have you been here on the ground enough, doing enough for people here?
Absolutely. Calvin Davis and I and Emily Henderson working in Whangarei. We've got Angie coming through in the Whangarei seat. What we have seen since we've been in government over the last 6 years is significant investment right across Northland into our roads, into our health system, into our schools, and you can see it all around you, and we're going to see some of it today. We're going to see 35 houses being built next door in the small town of Moiroa. We're going to see the hospital, which is a demonstration of over $900 million of investment into health infrastructure. We have delivered that through our advocacy here in Northland, and I think Northlanders actually are seeing that. When we are explaining that and spelling that out for them, they are seeing that this is investment that they've never seen before. However, we know that there is more to do because we're playing catch up. And so we need more investment, and we're committing to it. You look at it with our roading program that we have planned through our government policy statement, for example, the programs and initiatives we intend to keep in here, the houses that we will continue to keep building because there is a need here. We have a plan for that. It is costed. I'm not hearing anything come from the other side.
Hipkins, you said it's a tough time to be a Māori MP, obviously not from your own perspective, but Calvin and Jean, can you give some insights about this campaign? Is it different? Is it harder?
Why don't you share the example of what you've recently experienced?
In some of the candidate debates, I have received some of the worst comments and vitriol that I have experienced in 7 campaigns, 2 in local government and 5 for central government. At the Taxpayer Union debate in Kirikiri, and don't blame it on the Bearsies, I was being shouted down every time I went to answer a question by supporters of other candidates, primarily. There were not many of the general public in there. Whenever I said a te reo Māori word, like puku, for full tummies, lunches in schools, I was shouted at. When I said Aotearoa, the crowd responded, "It's New Zealand." When I said rangatahi, stop speaking that language. You know, that is racism coming from the audience. That's not disagreeing with the gains that I'm explaining that we've delivered as government. So I was shouted down when I'm doing that, and then whenever I used te reo Māori words, I was shouted at in that kind of way. That was reported by the media and those that were in the room. And I think that that's exactly what the Prime Minister's speech is speaking through today. That's not us, and those that are doing that, that is unacceptable.
Is it just that debate, or is it across all of it? You notice that vitriol right across Northland?
I have. You know, in 2 candidate debates, the lead question was on Prezi cards for Maori girls. Where did that come from? That was a question in the House from the ACT Party, and then people are asking me about division and race and favouritism within the health system. When I explain what the need is, because they said, why isn't it on need and it's on race, I explain what the need is. It's not accepted. And then they heckle me when I'm giving the answers to it. So that is that dog whistling that has been referred to, and I am experiencing that out on the campaign trail. But only in the candidate debates, really, and little meetings that have invited me to be able to be held accountable. So not in the general public. No, walking down the street, completely different story.
Are you surprised, given the high Māori population in Northland, that is happening here, or is it because of the people who are turning up and who are interested in those debates?
What is really worrying is that they feel so emboldened to be able to come out and say this stuff publicly. They don't care other people that might be in the audience or might be listening, or the impact that it has on us as candidates. You know, I am Māori. My mum is Pākehā, my dad is Māori. I think about my children. I think about those that we heard from today. When they are saying these sorts of things, these are the people that they are talking about. Northland is almost 50% Māori, and we can't go backwards. We need to keep moving forward, and that's what we heard in the speech today.
Calvin, did you want to add anything?
Look, I think Māoridom is getting really fed up with being used as the political football. We're hearing that the ACT Party wants to rewrite the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and basically that gives them the platform to do away with any references to Te Tiriti o Waitangi in any legislation. Māori have had enough of it, and we just hope that they all get out and go and vote for those parties who will stand up for Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and we won't tolerate the sort of rhetoric we are hearing and the sort of abuse that's been directed at our wahine Māori candidates who are standing regardless of the party.
Can I ask you a question about Oranga Tamariki? Are youth justice residences safe places for young people?
That's why we brought in Mike Bush to do his review. He's produced it. There have been, I think, 22 staff who have been stood down because of unacceptable behaviour. We've improved training. Mike Bush will stay in to implement the results of the review through to the end of the year. So things haven't been good, but we are making changes, and Mike Bush is the right person to lead and drive those changes.
So was that a yes? They are safe places now?
There has been huge improvements since we asked Mike to go in and review the residences. You know, we were concerned when we heard of the first instance of something happening. We hoped there was an isolated event. Within a week, there was another similar event in another residence, not related. And we said, well, we just can't take the risk. And Mike has gone in. He's done a very thorough review. He'll be implementing the outcomes of that review. Staff have been identified who have been stood down because their behaviour has been unacceptable. We'll do everything we can to keep those young people safe.
Prime Minister, you mentioned your desire to see the Maori voter turnout increase. What else have you been doing in your campaign to engage those voters and, say there's something here for you?
Yeah, so we've had a particular focus on door knocking, phoning and being active on the ground in our Māori constituencies and, reaching Māori voters on the general roll as well. We're really focused on making sure that Māori know what's at stake at this election and that we're getting them out to vote.
Can I just ask a quick few questions about the debate last night? In the light of day, can you commit to an orange being cheaper
Yes.
under Labour? It will be?
Yes.
Will it be 15% cheaper?
Yes.
Okay. How much did all of your promises cost you last night?
Well, as I've indicated, many of the commitments that we made with, in principle, so for example, lowering the age of bowel screening, we now need to work through, how we can step that out and what that will cost. So I can't put a number. Well, it depends on how you step it out. That will depend.
And will you change your fiscal plan to adapt it?
No, because as I've indicated, the commitments that I made last night can be accommodated within the fiscal plan. We have set aside money in the health budget for those sorts of things.
And what do you make of Luxon not staking his job on his foreign buyers' cash?
Well, he knows that day it just doesn't stack up. He knows that it's not even a credible policy. I think they have literally just plucked some numbers out of thin air in order to make their promises balance up. They know that there's just no way that they're going to be able to do it.
And menopause leave, would that be paid or unpaid?
Well, look, we're certainly not in a position to be doing anything in the paid leave space in that area at the moment. So it would be more likely to be unpaid. And as I said clearly in the debate, that's something that we can look at. I didn't make a specific commitment on that in the debate, and I won't do that now. But I'm certainly happy to look at it.
Should Rob Ballantyne be sacked as a New Zealand First candidate just for the sake of the unity of our country?
I think that the statements that he is making are absolutely outrageous. I think it's a question for Winston Peters and New Zealand First, but it's also a question for Christopher Luxon because he has said that he's willing to work with that. I'm not.
What would you do if you were in Winston Peters' shoes?
I'd certainly have him removed.
Just on climate change, there are calls for political parties to take a bipartisan approach on climate change. Do you think that should happen?
This is just absolute nonsense. Christopher Luxon wants to reverse every measure that we have put in place, the reducing our climate emissions. And then he says he wants a bipartisan approach on it. The reality is signing up to a target that's to get out to net zero by 2050, and then also proposing to undo every initiative that might help us to get there, leaves National with a massive credibility gap. If you look at the two things that he keeps referring to, he refers to more EV chargers. EV chargers do not reduce our emissions. Switching from combustion vehicles to electric vehicles does reduce our emissions, and he wants to take away the clean car discount that's actually encouraging people to do that. His electricity policy of doubling renewable energy might sound good on the surface, but look underneath it. We've got a goal of getting to 100% renewable electricity. The National Party want to take that away. So they actually want to increase the use of fossil fuels in the future for electricity generation. That's going to increase our emissions. Their numbers and their plan doesn't stack up.
But could you work with National and ACT if there was a way some bipartisan agreement could come? We've done it on other issues around Kiwi Bank or Super or other plans in the past.
If National,
would you be willing to do it?
If National and ACT actually want to reduce our emissions, of course we could work with them, but it's quite difficult to work with them to reduce our emissions when they oppose every single thing we're doing that's achieving that.
Did Helen? Oh, you go.
Just would Labour work with other political parties in Parliament after the election to come to some kind of shared agreement so there's a consistent plan for climate change going forward?
Well, we've attempted to do that. We certainly did that with the Zero Carbon Act, and we attempted to do that on pricing agricultural emissions. It was the National Party that walked away from that.
Did Helen Clark call you after the first leaders debate?
I don't think so.
Did she not phone you up and give you a rack up?
She exchanges, I've had the odd message from her during the campaign. I certainly got one from her last night, but I don't recall getting one after the first debate.
Did she give you any advice after that first debate via text?
No, I haven't spoken to her on that one.
Yeah. What did she say last night?
I think she was quite pleased. Thank you.
Did she give you a rating?
No.
Ka pai.